Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Franklin. I'm the program director of the Hudson Valley Writers Center, and I'm so happy to have all of you here with us today for this great reading and conversation with Alan Felsenthal, Charles O. Hartman, Ellen Kombiyil, and Alessandra Lynch. If this is your first time joining us for a reading, welcome. We hope you continue to come to our online readings, classes, and events. Please check out our website for the complete list of our offerings. We hope the local audience members here will join us at the center for our next poetry reading on Sunday, November 10th. And that will be Lily Press poets Mary Lou Bushi, who lives right here in Nyack, Jennifer Martelli and Eileen Cleary, who are coming all the way down from Boston, like Charles did today, and Dawn Lundy Martin. Please save the date for a fiction reading on December 8th with Christopher Jomsa and Tracy O'Neill with a holiday cocktail party after the reading for all of you to enjoy a drink and talk to the writers. And then we also have a reading of poetry on Wednesday, December 10th with Ichian Hutchinson and Catherine Barnett and Malachi Black, who's on a Fulbright this year coming from the furthest away. We also want to recognize the board and our teachers and students who are the beating heart of the center and thank them for all of their support, as well as the Bydale Foundation, the David G. Taft Foundation, NISCA, and Arts Westchester. I also want to thank my colleagues, Sophia Bannister, Misty Yarnell, Christina Papadopoulos, Ellen Archer, and Leslie Zinna, who's here co-hosting with me today, for all of their hard work. So we're going to start with Ellen Kombiyil. She is the author of Histories of Future Perfect and a micro chapbook called Avalanche Tunnel. Her new book, Love as Invasive Species, was just published by Cornerstone Books in September. Recent work has appeared or is forthcoming in New Ohio Review, Nimrod, North American Review, and Plowshares, the unicorn. She is a 2020 recipient of a Brio Award, which is Bronx recognizes its own from the Bronx Council of the Arts, a two-time winner of the Mary M. Fay Poetry Award from Hunter, a recipient of an Academy of American Poets College Prize, and was awarded the Nancy Dean Medieval Prize for an essay on the acoustic quality of Chaucer's poetics. So if you need some more Chaucer in your life, you have to look that up. A graduate of the University of Chicago and Hunter's MFA program, she currently teaches writing at Hunter College. I am so happy to welcome Ellen, who has come from all the way directly from the Youngstown Literary Festival this morning to come here to read for all of you today. So thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Jennifer, for just your presence and for doing this. Always such good readings. So I'm really delighted to read from my new book. Just a little bit about it. It's formatted in a singular way, and it's a Tet Besh, which is a head-foot book. So it has two front covers. When you flip it over, it's upside down. And so you read it and it's like side A and side B of a vinyl record. You read in side A and then you get to the middle and you have these two mirror sonnets that meet, and then you flip it over and you read it in side B goes into the middle poem. And the two sides, they reflect each other. So the poems on side A and side B, they sometimes have the same title in list order, or they sometimes have like shadow titles, and I'll explain that when I read it. But basically, I was trying to contend with a lot of the inherited stories that I was starting to notice, like these really strong patterns down my maternal line. And when I started really poking into them, just these repetitions became part of the structure of the book. So there's patterning, and you'll see certain images come back, or or even looking at from a different angle or trying to understand. I'm trying to reconstruct and assemble like all of these stories. So that's the reason for the book in this way. Okay, so I'm just going to start from the beginning. Why not? Prayer. Daughter, if I forget to teach you to hunger, to sup as I did, ice chips in the lawless 4 a.m. labor, awake with foot kick and elbow scrape, the body's rhythmic snoozing, then follow this dull ache that insists the body open. Here at the length of a vein, from navel's hollow to how low the azalea bloom, your propulsion into the expectant room. Oh, to hold or be held, to unspool loose thread, the hospital gown spilling behind you, how far it must stretch, unraveling when you climb the steps, press your fingers to check the spider plant's thirst until the garment gives out and who knows when. Oh, to block print in felt tip on the bracelet circling your wrist. Hello, my name is Birthday, and the shadow title for birthday is Pastoral. Birthday. We ate burgers bloody, buns toasted in grease, and where teeth split the meat, red dribbled down our chins onto the grass. August and the ghost moon shone without the sun having set. Bees pummeled my head so I'd get up and run, sit down again, slather butter on corn, get up, circle and duck, hand slap thigh, slap foot. The buried cat sprouted a raspberry bush. Nothing with thorns, Ma said, but that bush was an exception. My sister sat calm when a bee brushed her cheek. Like a statue, she said, but the world is a breathing place. Tulips dropped petals and the inner eyes of stalks stained fingertips. That night we whispered, my sister and I, through grill work, labyrinth of heating ducts that connected us. Ma's love cries echoed through the house. I baked a cake, ransacked the cupboard to cover it in sugared hearts. How sweet it was, feasting like that in the dark. You'll see some of the generations start to come into this next poem, which I call Love Song with Contradictions. What were you listening to, great grandma, down at the lake that Saturday night when you felt you couldn't breathe? Not those lowriders waxed and raring, but the way not those lowriders waxed and raring, but the way souped up carburetors suck oxygen to drag along the strip. Your gulping breaths, gurgling, ineffective. The ambulance fetched you. In the hospital, they lopped off your thick braids to think you never grayed, for convenience or to ease sweating. Grandma brought them home, kept them in a candle box next to her bed. Each night, she'd slide back the lid and touch them. The surprise of it. Oh, sorting the clutter after the house sold, Ma found them under the sink next to the Brillo pads. It was unexpected. Not the way, as a girl, when I first touched myself, thought I'll die from this. More like a child wandering aisles of jarred foods who looks up and can't spot her mother, howls a siren of rage. Love is not a boat moored on a lake that bobs on waves, more like a house, its foundation drilled into bedrock that in an earthquake still shakes. Can you explain this inheritance? Grandma nodded to her bed so she won't sustain a fracture. Oh, to be found but never claimed, picking bright pink cherries, not for glitz, but for sweetness. Pay attention, Ma said. Keep up. Something a little more lighthearted. Vixen lessons. Even dead Aunt Blanche at the dining table seance predicted I'd get killed by a bus. Only Ma said it wasn't so, her flannel robe flapping open in summer. You're fine, she said, fine as a goose down pillow. I cashed a check for my first stilettos on South Salina at the discount store. Traipsing kitchen hip swing and tossed back hair, sprayed mint on my tongue, soaked orange peels overnight on the sill. None of them thought I would turn out right. Days of 1985. The shadow title, and this is important because I'm going to flip the book over after this, so warning. Days of 1985, it has a shadow title, which is Lament with Swimsuit and Ouija Board. And then you'll hear the shadow title for the other poem. We who pretended to lie down at parties with lovers on vinyl couches, or wished we didn't but wouldn't admit it, licked salt from necks, bass leaping with our breath, or was it expanding, escaping inside us? The black light's purple stripes transforming eyes, teeth into green glowing beans, separate, alive, our faces into negatives, cried at dawn. If we did it, because the Coke bottle chose us when it spun. A boy jammed his tongue into my mouth, which was my first kiss. We didn't ask questions, or we fielded Ouija board guesses, yes, no, goodbye. I walked into that closet, willingly let them lock it. Oh, our wasted adolescence, assessing vertical stripes on swimsuits as a function of decreased belly fat, obsessed with how thighs pooled when we sat, how absent thigh gap leads to ruin. We dieted on cheese balls, one every 55 minutes, dissolved on the tongue to a well of melted butter. Or we teased our hair to make our faces slimmer. Ruin, from the Latin ruere, to fall, as in headlong or with a crash. We were always falling, laughing, collapsing, unable to stand, our bodies pulsing with famine. Okay, so then the poem that mirrors that one in the book has the main title, Obad as New Pastoral, but the shadow title is Lament with Swimsuit and Game Board. So you have swimsuits and a game in here. So there's a there's some overlap. There's a lot of swimming in this book. Obad as New Pastoral, for the lost beloved. We chopped beets for the borscht, and all afternoon, sweet steam filled the black and white kitchen. Wine glasses full, filling, up from the couch, down again, rotating spots in socked feet, radiators hissing. The walk home, I can't remember if I drove or with sneaker prints in snowdrifts, walked alone, but the torn down marquee flicked out, just like the time a man followed us. We crossed the road and looked back, but he turned into a dime flattened behind a lamppost. We played Parcheesi till dawn, yearning for summer, for swimming Lake Michigan, which, yes, you kept me to it, the two of us dressed for a picnic. We leapt in where waves broke over limestone blocks, where tidal flow crashed us toward rocks, our bodies alive with risk, with demand. We must press on, swim, no lady aboard a rowboat, counting strokes, no arms to lift us, dripping out. there was nothing erotic about it except the body's own pleasure and destruction. This is what always happens. I'll stand in a museum and my hand is a talon sketched by Michelangelo. Yes, it's the way I clutch my pen, the years crossing and it doesn't make a difference. You are the same one I held hands with at the double feature second run. You must understand. And when we kiss, we're kissing all the lovers we've ever had, all the future lovers. You must remember how water swallowed our skin, how each stroke flung droplets hungry for the sun. Like a scroll of instructions delivered by manservants bearing pomegranates. They're detailed in the letter, the one with the talon sketch. Palm leaf fans in marbled halls depict flies, sweat, steadfast in what we no longer want. I think I have two more. There's a lot of, I don't think I've read that many with a lot of creatures in them, but all of the artwork, I have a beautiful artist who did the artwork of the book. She's a Brooklyn artist. I think everybody should find her, Meiko Kikuchi. She does amazing work. But all of the things on the cover are like things in the book. And there's a ton of them. But I was writing this and my mentor at Hunter, Donna Massini, she's like, you have to write a poem about slugs. It has to be in here. I'm like, okay. And so this is the poem. This is the slug poem, so it's Donna's Salt. Lament with trash night and slugs. Engorged, banana spotted. Is it too much to say this? At night, their bodies glistened, creeping from the lawn, trailing slime toward our ocean. It must have been trash night or licked again with dew. In my defense, I was often barefoot, grass tickling toe spread. In my defense, I could just make out swing set shapes against the night where slugs would gather as for a council, and I too would listen. It was my sister who, from the kitchen, grabbed the shaker, spilled it evenly over the slugs, writhing white. We went down the row, slug after slug, but still they emerged from under the raspberry brambles, staining the sidewalk, unrepentant, exuding themselves without precision up the steps, or suctioned to the vinyl, splotch-ridden siding. Our grandma died, curled in a hospital bed near an uncurtained window. We watched her writhe, weak, all night, complaining of singing. Maybe it's crickets mating, I said, but I didn't believe this. Slugs make a loud, rhythmic scraping when they eat. On trash night, we hummed requiems, waiting for the contortions to stop. Hosed bodies under bushes. Our would listen. Remember who I am. And I'll finish with that one's shadow poem, mirror poem, Frisia. It's in two parts. And the shadow title is Lament with Inheritance and Wings. Frisia, 1. I was born on a sideways twilight with cars passing the interstate. The nurse telling Ma, don't breathe like that, honey. You'll wear yourself out. But Ma, you spilled salt, crossed legs when I crowned the blue of laid down carpet, blooming Frisia, your packed suitcase beneath a window, great grandma's apology pinned to my chest. You tried to be forgiven by baking pound cake, heavy and rich, sugar-speckled tin cast cut into thick slabs, June bugs budding against glass. It was lilacs, not freesia, spilling from the windows. How can I forget, Mama? I slid from you, wings closed, an almost glittering bird. 2. When aphids clone, shedding daughters onto lush stems, is their desire beyond survival, or are they merely content to gorge? Mother births daughter, her unborn granddaughter already curled within her, latching mouth and unsprung wings. Oh, Ma, Grandma, great-grandma, what sorrows you survived. You sugared them, yes, sorrows we slathered with peaches and called delicious. Oh, daughter, the not of us, how do I unteach you this? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellen. That was so wonderful. I'm glad you read the slug poem. We all need a mentor who will give us an assignment like that. It's not easy to write a book that has such a mirroring project going on. So real kudos to you for that. Alan Felsenthal's second collection, Hereafter, was listed as one of the most anticipated books of 2024 in Publishers Weekly. He is also the author of Lowly from Ugly Duckling Press 2017. His writing has appeared in Bomb, the Brooklyn Rail, Harper's, the New York Review of Books, and the New York Times Magazine. He is the co-editor of A Dark Dream Box of Another Kind, the poems of Alfred Starr Hamilton from the Song Cave 2013, and the editor of Bookworm, Conversations with Michael Silverblatt, the Song Cave 2023. He teaches poetry at NYU Tandon School of Engineering. And one of the things that binds all of these writers together is, other than their excellent poetry, is the way that they uplift and work for other writers in the literary world. So it's a special group today. Alan, thank you for editing, for your own poetry. The last time you read here was with Alex Dimitrov, I think, in 2017. Yeah, so welcome back. Thank you for coming up here for this today. Welcome.
And thank you to Jennifer for putting this together. I'm sure you all know how much work goes into putting together a reading series, classes, a writing center. So talk about uplifting poets. Jennifer does the work. I'm very excited to read with Charles, Ellen, that was beautiful, and Alessandra. So this is the first poem in the book. It's called Elegy. And it was written for my friend Bob, who died in 2021. Elegy. Electrolytes are hard to see, though they're everywhere. Recover quickly, commands the blue bottle. When will I be able to leave this planet, you asked? Months for some, hours for others, I read in the hospice brochure. The earth alights on the edge of the ether, calcium in the crust, in the air, in water. White lines along your shirt trace where salt left. The friction we feel between us and light is darkness, the pain unable to be untied or loosened. Minerals obey their crystalline structures. The soul seeks remission and requires more. Untrained augur, the sky is omenless, but it's your duty to look at it. Under the sun is nothing at night, the hummingbird in deep torpor, preserving itself with the stiffness of a coma. Stationary or in motion, the force bonding the universe, friendship. In the clearing, a few weeping trees among the shaded beds we can see from yours. Each flicker, cricket, snore of the pickerel frog, howling dog you smiled at. A beaver who kept rebuilding the dam you dismantled dozes in a hollow, warm tonight. Light excels, splits into a spectrum I see you through, the saddest optical path. Other dimensions follow nature, where you will sleep. God is light you can see without being consumed. If you cannot see me, adjust the lampshade. I may be lost to blinking electric headlights bypassing your home. I recently learned the heart can beat outside a chest with help from a machine. The machine works no harder than it needs to, and I acknowledge its restraint. Care exhausts me until I acknowledge everything. I'm here to make the kettle whistle. I thought I'd come and give you a look, the look reserved for visiting hours. I know clocks die without help. I'm no longer afraid of fugitive germs. Yesterday, we learned that suffering is not only not noble, some people don't experience it. And what's worse, unless a doctor tells them, they never know. And the suffering you're feeling as I write this won't turn you into a better person, since the bargain involved with suffering assumes we all do. We don't. The unsympathetic winter, gusting through the oldest white oaks near the Hudson, continues. And so do you, knowing you are cold, while others are less cold or not cold at all. You have done your work. There is no wisdom where you're headed, no vexation either. The bird carries its matter in its voice. I speak into a far-off sound. The loneliest phones don't ring. Are you at the gate? Does this key get you out or keep you in? I say they should let you leave. Your host, who shows up once a week, left a comfort kit in the fridge that I called a clemency box. Haloperidol, lorazepam, promethazine, morphine liquid, etc. The precious ointment is cold. Who lifts the lid? Let him now appear. Windows dim when you attempt to look through. Doors latch themselves. The sound sunken or quiet, except for the owl. An almond tree we cannot see with white or pink flowers grows beyond the window. There is a shaded street where a broken wheel rolls back its way home. To whom will you return your spirit? You have proven the way toward death is worse than death. Through the shadow of the earth, the soul wafts. I will pay the debts. Is there anything else? And then this is called Impasse at Sunset. Many of these poems are about grief, but I'll try to read some light ones as well. It's a sunny day. Impasse at sunset. A wish stillness shares. Its matter due with life. A look betrays light in a dance. The valley you roved, tracked by dusk-filled steps. Trap of nearness, the knock. The door with its clinched doornail parts from the threshold. The toll awaits. Step forward. Open the door to lips. They don't speak, they kiss. This is for my friend Betty, who made the voyage here on train. This is called Gull Island. In summer, the diurnal laughing gull seeks palms with crumbs along the beach, his black hooded head punctuated by a sharp red beak that picked shells from the nest after an egg hatched, in case a shard of shell settled upon another prevents hatching of the next. Since even a sliver, the size of your thumbnail untrimmed, its weight less than a penny, is too heavy for the pipping of a chick's egg tooth under the egg's roof. The parent beak plucks, extracts a foreign grief, so chicks can roughly lift enough to live. Take a sip of water. And this one's called Stay Dry. It's better to want nothing more than a voice, to say what is sweet, what is sacred, but not what you can't say. The sky and earth sundered, diamond dust froze, for a child to speak at home. Say what you must to the house where your parents lived, even if it's not the same door you remember. The former house hears you. The land remembers all. Buildings, homes, temples, and never forgets a foot that traipsed over its face. I've forgotten what I said I wanted to tell you, but no matter. The wind says it for me. The wind says it for you. To know a secret weather holds. It's raining again, and on your birthday, droplets are heavy. Your lover has left you an umbrella. Here's a little bit lighter. This is called Self-Portrait. In the ailanthus tree, I saw myself wafting between branches and their unfallen flowers. I balanced in the air, perfecting a kind of nonchalance nobody needs anymore. I lacked the analogy for what I hadn't felt yet. I tried to make myself predictable, banal, and for years was my own analyst. In front of where I waited, I could hear rumbling like water rushing through a canal. The surge appeared. I looked into its eye, an exterior analog of my inner world. Then I knew my true name was Avalanche. This is called Dreamship Helmsman. Maria lulls me to slumberland, where I am charged with sailing a ship with 17,000 children aboard. My first job after getting a captain's license. I declined to tell my employer about my narcolepsy. Instead, I decorate the helm's spokes with bells, so I rouse upon hearing their rings and arrive in time for the wedding. That was the light section. And a few more. This is called Poem of the Pond. Moonless light, the sorrow of listening to calls of olive frogs, soft, uniform, their skin damp from hunting speechless snails, slugs, small lives of the leaf litter. Poets draw clouds, dirt, mud, night, streams, dawn, to tell us how a goodly, heavy rain washes away for a short time mosquitoes, ascending toward the heavens, their bodies of blood. They scribble one gesture for the young fox, impelled to haunt, her soft gray paws stepping over a thumb-sized hole where white mice hide, to show us life, alert and destructive. This old natural lair, this font of spawn, an altar upon which relentless gifts of existence resurge, lift, raise, appear. But pastoral elegies of this world, any appetites available here, can't bring back to us one dear friend now gone. This is the last one. Ordering a casket from Amazon Prime. Sounds funnier than it is. It's just the title. It's just the title. Avoid cramps by keeping your grip parallel to the hip. 20 gauge steel, but surprisingly light. It's called the Atlas XL. You may hear Atlas and conjure a collection of maps and charts with his picture as the frontispiece. He is the sea. He is a mountain whose cave shelters the witch. He fathers nymphs and protects trees. He carries celestial cities on the nape of his neck. Think of the casket as his open palm, cradling your loved one like a precious metal. Consider the sacrifice he makes by using his palm this way. The golden apples are gone, his shoulders heavy, the heavens unheld drop. Thank you.
Wow, Alan, thank you so much. That was amazing. And you never have to apologize to us for sad poems. We, as my students know, all the sad poets come here for classes, and we welcome them with open arms. Thank you for that. Alessandra Lynch's fifth book of poetry, Wish Ave, was just published by Alice James Books this month. Her previous collection, Pretty Tripwire, was published in 2021. She is also the author of 3 other poetry collections, Sails, The Wind Left Behind, It Was a Terrible Cloud at Twilight, and Daylily called it A Dangerous Moment. You just feel like you read the titles and you feel like you've just read a book of poetry. That won the Balcones Prize, was finalist for the LA Times Book Award and the UNT Rilke Prize, and was listed as a New York Times top 10 poetry book of 2017. Her work has appeared in the American Poetry Review, the New England Review, the Kenyon Review, Plowshares, and other journals. She has received residencies from MacDowell, Yaddo, the Lannan Foundation, and the Vermont Studio Center. She has been the recipient of a Barbara Deming Award and a Creative Renewal Fellowship Award. She has also been a featured blogger for the Poetry Foundation's Harriet Books. Currently, she serves as Butler University's Poet in Residence, where she teaches in the undergraduate and MFA programs. Everyone, please help me welcome Alessandra.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your incredible work. I echo what your sentiments. Thank you for your lovely poetry, and I'm looking forward to hearing your poetry as well. So I'll be reading exclusively from Fifth Avenue, Wish Avenue. And all of these poems were written during the pandemic. Many of the poems actually are conversations. When I was working in my poetry shed, it's canary yellow with a purple gentian door. Voices started kind of coming out on the page, so I was following them and they were having conversations. So the third poem in here and several beyond that are conversation poems, but the first couple I will read are not. And I will probably just read them. I think I have about 7 to read to you. The speaker runs through shadows. Charcoal gray, the shadows, sometimes the blue of gathered dust. I ran through a blur of them, soundlessly they'd fallen around the others, branch shadows, telephone wire shadows, sleety shadows, church shadow, and the shadows of incorrigible fences where nothing was to be kept in or out. Indistinguishable, some shadows, one from the next, others well-formed and painful to watch, torn up shadow mouths of fish, the battered head of a shadow dog, the softness of crises past, they were not ominous. I ran through them so heavily, I made a world of shadow. If I could will myself to fall as beautifully. There's the tiny shadow of that flower, foxglove, shadow shelf for rain, shadowy grass spikes on pale pave, shadows flattened on the roads we speed down, deposed from our meadow and its numerous inscrutable shadows, separate in our sexless shadow cars, yielding, stopping, going as instructed by commodified light. What of the laughter of shadows? What of the respiratory shadows of leaves blown by wind? The counterpoint of your shadow with the child's, merging, breaking apart, merging again. What of loneliness? Great signifier, shadow of breath. After a massacre of wrens, the speaker tells the story of Michiko. Massacre of wrens on the sun porch, blue eyelids of the buried, blue eyelid of our planet, tint of bluish yolk. Several cities over, love propped up on cardboard signs, be kind. Michiko left the neighborhood. She'd given me a paper bag, spotted caterpillars, a glass jar filled with leaves they could eat. The clouds whitened merciless. We sat in the pooling blood of our shadows. Some days I will the planet to swallow us, and closer to its core, we could become iron or shale. Often I will us to be stiller, more harmless. We could reform as fish, velvet-eyed, blue-finned, quivering. The caterpillars crawled out or died. Michiko would loop round in beautiful, extravagant loops, feeding ferns and lilies to the neighborhood, trilling, hello, hello, beautiful day. We need to know her words to keep humanity humane, break from our dazed, stuttery circling. The circles circling inside me now, sometimes sidle, sometimes pop or thinly hiss. Sometimes I open my mouth and out they float, gathering till they're dense blue as smoke. In the dream, someone offered to buy me a coat, but who was he? Without telling us, almost on tiptoe, Michiko left the neighborhood. Unfettered, right, safe word she was. She looped, didn't circle. The remnant wren fledglings clung to the screen, their nervous heads, darting eyes, one with a thrashed up wing, the other stump-legged. Did you leave them a plate of water? Would you bury them as you had the first? Michiko crouched in the grass, hands in the dirt, spade by her side. Trickles of wren blood here and there on the porch, a spotty massacre of poked up feathers, bloody beaks, toothpick bones, those opaque shields that were eyes, pitted heads, all of it, the whole desecration could fit in my hand. We overlooked all of it in the interest of. You must invent a new language, a new universe to contain horror. Michiko planted flowers on every street in the neighborhood. She pushed a small yellow wheelbarrow of bushes and saplings down the street, so simply made you'd think she'd suffer no collisions. Hello, hello, beautiful day. Streaks of light in her hair, on her cheeks. My daughter is a figure skater. My husband, here she stopped speaking. Another fledgling now in the corner of the porch, tiny beak open, half wing aflutter, also maimed. She had to gather herself before she could speak. What does their huddling mean? Why did the well one stick by the sick one? What do their flat wings weigh? He no longer sings, she looked away. He was a cellist in the orchestra. The unmeddled meddling, one voice addresses the speaker. Someone's shadow sinks in a chair upstairs. Where are the children? One hallway over. I don't know what to do, where to go. Are they safe? Is anyone? Does a sinking shadow make a noise? What do you hear? Awaiting a cue from the children, or maybe from the shadow in its chair. What is outside? A trellis and a ladder. Go outside then. Hang clematis and dark-eyed juncos from one, climb the other. To the dead branch above the low house. To a star, you need to pay attention now to one thing at a time. The cat is crying. She's old, she's near her time. Her time? Death? I don't want time then. Time is a stone in a pocket. It's a cold poker, a runway, a gangplank. I want the stone from your sentence, but nothing else. I wish the dreadful shadow would reach the bottom already. This sinking is unnerving. Does a shadow reach bottom when done sinking? I want it to vanish. I want the cat to sleep on the chair. You once ran. Was that a kind of sinking? Did you reach bottom? I ran and ran and ran till I raced and meddled. I raced and meddled, ran, raced, meddling and meddling and meddling. There wasn't a bottom to that. You didn't feel victorious? Not then, not now. If you didn't care about winning, what did you want? To unmeddle, vanish, that old tune, not reach the bottom, sink below bottom. It's something like your son says in the songs he makes. I want to die, but I don't want someone to kill me. Could be shame. Could be a wishbone. I want to move toward a book. I can still hear the shadows sinking. I'm restless. You are sitting in stillness. I want to be a stone, under river water or sea. How simple, how elemental and beautiful. Why the ladder? Why a trellis? The only things keeping me alive. They're structures that could dissolve the shadow, send its particles where they belong. They are directives without imperative. Yes, together they are a lullaby. Shh, I think the shadow's done with its sinking. It's hovering over us, listening. Was that a dream we had? Two voices. Was that a dream we had? Now we're floating over a field in a fish and wildlife area, floating over marsh fields where sandhill cranes poke around for crayfish and snails, then rest their slender necks. Indefatigable reflections glimmering. When you say indefatigable, I think of Plath. Are they in crisis? As we, the human voice, the art of conversation in crisis, yes. And the sandhill cranes rising en masse over ice tufts gleaming. How wide an eye does it take to perceive bird feet, a human body, the burning forest, polar bears, all as one, trillium, allium, the sea, flagellum, snow as the ghosts of stars, stars the ghosts of knowing. What are we doing here? We're here to track the spirit of the speaker, impossible without more world flooding in as she rests herself awake. It might take all the music of the spheres to awaken humans to themselves, to the earth. A poignancy in her efforts to rouse herself. Trying to find Michiko, the speaker speaks to someone she thinks is Michiko. The rosebush can go there on the southeast side, Michiko. Last night I heard the wind, or were those human screams? I'll put the rosewood heart box beneath the window. Screams like my tiny dog screamed hanging from the hawk's beak, small as a leaf, a screaming leaf. Should I use a trellis for the roses? Silence. I'm losing your voice, Michiko. I'm not Michiko. I'm several masks beyond her. The screams weren't the hawks, weren't your tiny dogs, weren't a leaf's and not yours. Oh? Once an icicle suspended from the northwest eave could scream. Once a child. How can I begin to mourn? You want Michiko to return. You want to talk about roses, how to plant them, where. I want to thank her for the 2 red bud trees she planted, one for each child in this story. What other recourse than to fill the neighborhood with screams? Nobody else would speak. They stopped washing their bodies. They ate too much or nothing. I want Michiko back. I want to show her the bright-eyed rabbits hidden in boxwood, red cardinals, the children's favorites. The rose bush can go aside. There will be sun, and from young honeysuckle branches, a trellis. The speaker tells a story, the voice was barreling down the road in a 77 Silver Hornet station wagon, almost comical, could fit a passel of children and animals. Under what sky? Was it glitter-picked? How many windows? Many windows, daylight cut through, my throat tightened, no blood, several snowbirds flew overhead. Where were you going? You mean toward which personal loss was I heading? Pause. I turned and turned the key, sputtered and shook and stopped, turned the key again, the sky a cloudless ache. Have you ever seen a blue ache crossed through by snowbirds, no blood? When the car finally started, where were you going? Barreling down the road in a 77 Hornet, almost comical, heading toward the hospital, flying through stop signs, flying through squirrels, angular weeds shuddering. I banged past. And 9 miles to go, white Buick ahead, the driver driving the limits down the road. I was barreling till he slowed below the limits. I honked, I flashed my lights, I yelled out the window, honked, flashed, yelled, move on, move on. The birds fled, the driver slowed near to a halt. He didn't move to the shoulder. He gave me the finger before turning left. He was not thinking about private loss. The sky ached, bright weeds angled up, sideways, frozen silver, the 77 Hornet barreling, weaving and honking in his rearview mirror on a road that was otherwise quite empty. Almost drained the road was. The birds didn't return. When do we think about private loss, the private loss of other drivers on the road? When do we think about our own? I wasn't thinking. The driver wasn't budging. He wasn't thinking. Did you ever make it to the hospital? He wasn't lying down on the bed. He was sitting up, his eyes closed, face beautifully painless, his skin opaque. Silence. I got to the hospital late. I paused for a fatal minute at the gleaming doors. And I will end with one that I thought I had marked. Maybe I should look in the table of contents. That's a good idea. Yeah, let's see if it's good. Maybe not, I'm not meant to read that one. Okay, I'll read the other one. You know? I can't believe you told them. 2 voices. I can't believe you told them about the hawk fluttering, striped wings, and the creek for a wash, soft chest. No, that we are always here, always ready to speak. I'd never seen such tenderness in a hawk. And that we are waiting in the shadow of the buckeye, the redbud, a swamp oak sapling. I thought of the red tulip, black dots in its wide mouth. A flower to represent us, its boldness, assertiveness, or an indigo bunting or a tulip tree's ruddy scouting. Can't just turn on an image like a spigot, pal. We're all thirsty here. I might go into hiding in the desert. First, follow me to the riverbank. What is it you're sporting? Sycamore limb and ragweed. Is that river shale in your hair? Close, blue asters and marsh marigolds. To keep you warm? Here's a stone for your mouth, one for mine. What about the red tulip? It'll hold our world in place. And our endless conversations? They'll let it loose. Long pause. Voices. Child, Let's get out of here. Speaker. But there's a sun shower in a dandelion field. We can bring that with us. And the stone bird bath? Yes. Then what are we leaving behind? Trauma. Say again? We're leaving behind splinters, a chasm where a staircase should be, the total breakdown of the woods. How are we to move? Follow our voices. Dark has its velvet too. Do you love me? Yes. Will you warm my hands? Yes, yes. My coat is unbuttoned. The wind is cold and sharp. We will button your coat and hold your hands. If I'm too quiet, what will you do? We will listen. Do I need to ask permission to leave this place? We are walking with you. We are here. Are there houses whose inhabitants are not only shadows? Yes, those are the houses that carry and hold light, that will carry and hold you. Then what are we leaving behind? An Arctic palace, a sealed in suffering, the dark that is not velvet.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, Alessandra. And I'm glad you read the tulip poem at the end. Yes, yes, thank you. Okay, now Charles O. Hartman has published 8 poetry collections, including Downfall of the Straight Line, out just now from Arrowsmith Press, New and Selected Poems, and Island Poems. He has also translated the work of Yannis Ritsos and maintains those translations in an online archive. His poetry has also appeared in numerous anthologies. He has published a textbook called Verse, an introduction to prosody, and 3 books of critical prose: Free Verse, an essay on prosody from Princeton University Press; Virtual Muse, Experiments in Computer Poetry from Wesleyan; and Jazz Text, Voice and Improvisation in Poetry, Jazz, and Song from Princeton. For the Unsung Masters Series, he co-edited Wendy Battin on the life and work of an American master out in 2020 with Pamela Alexander, Martha Collins is here today, and Matthew Krajniak. Hartman is the Lucy Marsh Haskell 19 Professor of English at Connecticut College, where he has taught since 1990. He is the co-founder with Battin of the Contemporary American Poetry Archive, where out-of-print volumes of poetry are preserved online and can be accessed free of charge by anyone with internet access, which is a really wonderful thing. And thank you, Charles, for driving all the way in traffic from Boston today to be here with us for our community. Please welcome Charles.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for all you do and for that nice introduction. I didn't actually drive all the way from Boston. We just drove from New London. Martha had driven down from Cambridge yesterday. So it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. I don't know what all those people are doing out there. Is that it? God, nobody told me. Apparently so. Yes, yeah, exactly. Thank you all for being here. I'll begin by reading the first poem in this book, Downfall of the Straight Line. And I'll probably end by reading the last poem in it. But there are others in between, I promise.
Buy the book.
So, right. A glorious sky. The clouds look proud because we have to gape so far up. Really, they're confused and disconcerted, herded, riven, with not much time as clouds. How fine that they up there take after us, waiting, demented by levity, by brevity, driven a sky, evaporating. But what levity, what a view. I really screwed that up. Levity occurs once, not twice, in that poem. Oh, well. That's a new poem now, you see. Many of the poems in this book, not all of them, but many of these poems are spoken by somebody or something that is sort of demonstrably not me. As you'll see, this is pretty evidently an example. It's called Donkey in the Air. While I stood as usual, they added stones to the back of the cart, presumably behind the axle. So, not suddenly, but at some tipping point, the market square began to fall away. Look at that bell tower. Who would have guessed? Meanwhile, the chest, supposed to hang from the firm arch of the spine, ached in harness. The clapper lolled. If I've been sure of anything, it's footing. Now I find less traction than a swimming dog. Could try what the birds do. No. You're gaping. I would too. I have a couple of ideas which unfortunately involve hands. You capped fool with the camera, why not scurry to unload stones, return me to the useful earth? No, this is too much fun. Snap on, develop, print, make a postcard to amuse your tourists from Pakistan to Naples, till it slips into the fist of a Greek who will do a trick to transpose my hung, ridiculously elevated body into a picture of his own village to shame the locals. Then one of you can turn it into words, also good for bandying about. Always glad to be of whatever service in the quarry of your decades. At last, since nobody wants to deal with me dead, somebody starts lifting off counterweights. No plummet, just hind legs, a little kicking, watch the tail, then 4, back in the belonging dust. That's settled. I identify strongly with that donkey. And similarly, in a way, this poem has an epigraph from the Grateful Dead. All graceful instruments are known. Elsewhere on that record, they also say all known instruments are graceful, which is probably more true, but the piano. Amid so much sleep, we remember the waking phrases, iterations bored or rapturous, resounding hours, rehearsals of the opulent impromptu, the melody sketched by a right hand once and let drop. We almost remember the 100 hands, thousands of operations, fashioning us for the sleek showroom, the dim loft, the highly favored dorm, the not quite defunct club, solarium, atrium. Among us, we have taught some children what they are. Whether we're grand, the satin titan with mammoth underbite, or upright, but spinet is an ugly name. Everyone has a fallboard eyelid. We all need work. My felts haven't been pricked for years. The sostenuto's flabby. A long life can be ghastly, last decades in an untunable basement, peeling, untouched even into noise. Once on a loading dock, Steinway CD 318 and I passed back to back. Gould's own on loan to Evans. This was before the fall. Another I knew stroked Tatum's fingers, then Peterson's. a junker by then with a fresh coat of paint. When monks burned, everyone went dumb for a day. When I first came home under the round window, even as I heard the truck's pads and dollies tucked back in while guys flexed shoulders for the next, on that still first morning, I answered Bach with Bach, and when at last she stood and away from me to speak to some others, I knew her heart was mine. This poem is called Peripheral Vision. It's also disappeared. Something in the room. Peripheral, you know, how far you can see back to the sides of your head. And it refers fairly early on to a periptero. Anybody who has lived in Athens anytime in the last probably 60, 80, 100 years knows all about peripteros, because they are where you buy everything. They're little things there on the corner, and they're run by the government. Anyway, apparently they're on the verge of disappearing. They're not, those contracts are not being renewed, and nobody will recognize the city anymore at that point. So that's not what the poem is about, but it's anyway. Peripheral vision. An optometrist told my father his could have made him a great truck driver. They test for that. Around the curve of the century, I see him at it, a violent road volunteer, long haul and lonely. I see him as peripterist, owner of an Athens corner news and sundries hut, vital to daily life, the neighborhood's central intelligence, a veteran among veterans, the wounded and the war widows, ensconced like a fighter pilot behind ranks of magazines and chips, bus tickets and sunglasses, books with the spines outward, goods on the outer slopes heaped at the angle of repose, the least expensive, the most visible. Hunched on the stool in his 2-meter cave, room for one, eyes on everything, manning the panopticon, watchful of wares, purchase port on the swarming street with side slats to guard first and third base, shelves inside piled to the apex with condoms and cigarettes, guidebooks in the less demanded languages, everything in reach. At the back, the hutch. It must have been my father who took me to see Violent Road. My mother wouldn't have. Or was it The Wages of Fear, French with subtitles, which Violent Road remade? In the age of knowledge, no way to know, no one to tell me. I see myself, son and heir and near double in spirit, as in want of those leather blinders for a horse between shafts, to keep it focused, keep it from being spooked. If only not to remember, only I wander out here, street legal, with no commodities, footloose, or as they call it, free. This book doesn't have a title poem, but if it did, this would probably be it. It's called Crab Nebula. The subtitle is AD 1054, the year when the guests started. You know it. When I, upon the rise of gravity, threw violently around me the gaudiest shawl the universe has room for. When I turned so hard on myself and fast that only flesh substantial as mine could cohere, a self so concentrated that whatever crossed me, I menaced with devouring. When I tortured the very place I turned in, scene of my so recent long assembled, glorious undoing, and for an hour hesitated on the brink of taking all my brilliance in out of this time entirely. Then I glanced once more at what I'd thrown aside and saw devised in that stuff of my disaster, tissue of worlds, blood of minute beasts, endlessly raveling strew of circumstance, histories strange to mine in everything but plot. All of it certain, all for now still blazing away in such incipience that those far off would strain and say, a cloud. Uh, the, read three poems that sort of form a sequence, kind of a sequence. The first of them is called Choosing Sides. Not to go to bed, but to stay the night there, we have to work out who gets which. Whose habits stronger decides, except in the happy case where bents agree. This is universal, yet we have no common language for which is which. North or east won't do. Nearer the bathroom and beside the lamp fall short of the particular variety among beds. We'd like to say just right or left, but whose and lying face up or down. We figure all this geography out as we must. It may take talk, all to the good, being what we do best. And then Moonlight, title is two words. Bless her who blessed us with this gift, this bauble, Pharaoh's paraphrase of Earth's our satellite, a bubble to make your room a fable of seeing through the night. This 3D printed globe, crater by crater true, minutely rough, as is no doubt the original to the soft hand of God, hankers to show us us. Who knew it was so light, that clinker in the sky? To rest its ounces on a wireframe cube of basswood. Who knew it had a button to switch from gold to rare blue and dim it too? We said this afternoon, looking ahead tonight, last up turns out the moon. And a sonnet, regular in rhyme, but irregular in the length of the iambic line. We know. The time will come, we know, when one of us, catching a summer chill, takes on the full-time, lifelong chore of being ill, or something sidesteps all that fuss. Some blow we won't have leisure to discuss, one absent-minded footfall on a hill, or too close to a cougar's kill. Soon or late, one will prove the obvious. The other, paperwork and speeches done, will come home to the thought of home, wanting a drink, a kiss, not to be there another year or 20. In that too spacious minimum, at least for a time, there will be time to think back over plenty. Well, since we're on the topic, the birthdays of the dead. It is an affront in their land to remind someone of that first exile, because they recollect the sojourn with terror still and regret loss of it. All those dawns, roads, splinters, whiskeys, and hard chairs, all that fucking and eating and talk. They never talk, since it takes tongue and breath. All that breathing, they say inside themselves when the memorial comes around. Well, out of that cadence, they say, all day. No more of those little amnesias, the sleeps. Now they have more than all the time in the world. Someone just across the border has tied 2 fingers together with black thread, not to forget till nightfall and the time to cut it. 2 more short poems. One called Autumn Ordinance. And this poem follows the shape of a Homeric simile, right? You know, just as the shepherd watches the snowflakes coming down, so the arrows, right? I mean, a really lovely literary form that Homer did not invent. He obviously picked it up from the past, but I mean, it's the revenge of the lyric on the narrative, right? Anyway, Autumn Ordinance. Just as when you keep watch on the ground ahead of where your boots kick up the leaves, the path goes vague and blurred, while if you lift your eyes, the far reach of the trail comes clear, comes lucid as map. So when you look at tomorrow through next year, the way otherwise so tangled and burdensome clears. And if the leaves are, as they likely are, fallen from the trees around you, then you get to look deeper into things than spring allowed. Coming for us. This is the last poem in the book. It's called I Made a City, and it's a little myth, I guess. I made a city walled in wood and set it in the sea. I named the flood our gravest good and surety. We watched the clouds that are and read the wind for way, living the near to learn the far of the last day. Storm rains cuneiform on wave recorded our long lore. So all we gave we might yet have if we reached shore. I settled us on the tall hill where wisdom rests her soul, and the owl lit on the old sill and made us whole. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. That was wonderful. Oh my God, that sonnet. So can you come back up here with all the other readers, and we'll do a brief Q&A for the audience, and then we'll sell books and sign them. Jennifer's here from the Village Bookstore, as always, to sell books for us. So one of the reasons our readings are all free is so people can buy books. Okay. I'm gonna give you this to hold.
Hello. What? It's okay.
Oh, you have a chair here, Alan. Yeah. I'll just put it.
Do you want to sit down? It's not right in your eye.
More or less.
Yes,
Push over.
Oh, that's so much better.
good.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, don't fall off that. If you all smish over a little bit, you're going to be good. Yeah. Okay. You okay? Do we have questions for the audience, or I can always ask our usual fallback question first while you guys think of your questions. We have a lot of students who are working on their first collections and ordering them, putting them together. So any advice that you have for people working on their first collections, pitfalls, what to do, what not to do? Who wants to go first on that one? Yeah,
So many pitfalls.
so many pitfalls, right?
Those first collections.
Yeah, yeah.
Wouldn't you say there are a lot of pitfalls? I think that it's really easy to be thinking too much about your audience or your readers or what is expected or what you're familiar with in terms of books. So my advice to my students is to really follow the wild song. What is your wild song, or what is most authentic to you? What really, I always say to my students, if you feel like you want to carry that poem you've written around all day, in your pocket, and it's just this special thing that's kind of glowing in your pocket and you just love it and you have this like secret relationship with it. I'd say if you have like a whole bunch of poems like that, I think that's a book, and I wouldn't worry too much about making it into a project. I would, you want to really respect and honor the individual will of the poem. And so that might mean that some poems don't seem as though they belong together at all, but they all do. They're all from you. They're all from your psyche. And I think just going with that and not getting too conscious about it, especially at the very beginning of creating a collection. That's what those are some things that popped into my blind mind.
Are we supposed to talk into this or just
Yeah.
hold? Okay, talk into it. Gosh, first collection. I really love putting books together. I think it's fun. And so like, and it can be frustrating, obviously, but I think if you can just be in the playful mode of it, that's like the best, right? Like you've made these poems, gather them all together, read them like they're new, like I read them all aloud so you can hear them in your mouth. And sometimes then you'll reconsider them. I think that was one of the most helpful things. And then I just sort of, I'm tactile, so I print them out and then I let them touch each other, and then they want to find their friends, like which ones want to be near each other, which ones don't, because sometimes it's just like they just fall flat when like they could be two terrific poems, so they don't want to be next to each other. And likewise, some poems are just they need to be touching. And let it be just exploratory. Like I find it really fun. Like it's a game, like it's a puzzle. And I think if you can find that energy, then you can't go wrong, is sort of my approach to it. And don't worry about like I've tore this apart, redid it, like you'll do it over and over again, and I just kept a table of contents, like a working table of contents, so I wouldn't forget an order that might have worked. And then I could take it apart and find new ways until it felt like it was, it made me happy. And just like pay attention to how you feel, right? Like if it's making you happy, that's good.
Yeah, I echo everything. And then I would just say, take your time. There's really no need to rush. Everyone will be ready for the book when it's ready. And, I remember I have a friend who I would hear a lot of people say like, my parents did the best that they could do. And my friend said, is that really true? Cause like the best is like superlative, like it's maybe your parents did what they could do, but I feel like with the first book, it's like for me, I was like, this is the best I can do right now. And I sat with that book for years before sending it out. And because I have to live with it. And that's the thing. I guess it's like wait until you're ready because you have to live with this book. You go to bed thinking about it. Other people put it on their shelf and I hope they pull it off the shelf and read it, but it's really your relationship to the book. So just take your time.
My first collection was long enough ago so that it's difficult for me to remember what in the world I did. And between the time that it was accepted and the time that it was published was 7 years, which was a very good thing because I got to take almost everything out of it and put in new and much better stuff. I retired just 2 years ago, and each year, and from Connecticut College, which is an exclusively undergraduate institution, so we didn't have graduate students. So my students were not doing first collections, but the best were doing honors theses. And my colleagues learned that every year they could tell when my poetry students were ready to turn in their theses because they would come by my office and there would be the students sitting there on the floor with this arc of poems surrounding them. And you just keep shuffling them until they speak to each other in some relatively polite way.
Question back here from Lily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here you go.
Thank you for this reading. This was wonderful. I had a question for Ellen. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the form of your book and how you came to the mirroring, but also I'm curious, like at what point that entered the book for you and if how that really changed the content or, that it seems like that would be really something that would reverberate. And I would love to hear more about just how you came to it, the effects that it had. Thanks.
Thank you, Lily, for that question. Yeah, it took a long time to figure out that the book wanted to do this. Like, it wasn't a surprise that there was a lot of patterns, right? Because I'm talking about family patterns and the repetition. I'm writing from different perspectives, different family members. And that was happening. But then I had it at one point, it was like, oh, there's just two parts and they were relatively equal. And then the poet Lynn Melnick, she read it and she was like, I think some of them want to share titles. And that to me helped me see it in a different way. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then when I started playing with that, I was like, oh, yeah, they really do kind of share titles. And then for a while, it didn't flip yet. That was the last piece. Like, it was like right there. And I was still trying to figure out that, you have some babies that you love and you're like, does it go in? I kept putting some in, taking some out. You can do that like forever. And then I was looking, I like let it sit for a while and I look at it again. I let it sit for a while. I looked at it again. And then something was like, no, it needs to like, they need to really, really like relate in that way, like in list order with the titles. And when I started pulling it out, I started really like mapping it. Like I had like it was like kind of like the serial killer map. Like it was like, things. And I was like, oh yeah. And then it was like, they really like lined up and then like, oh, and it needs to meet in the middle. And I had the one sonnet in the middle. I'm like, I have another poem that's sort of like that. That's a sonnet. I'm like, does it have the same title? And it did. Like, I'm like, I could put the same title on it and I revised it, but it was like, it worked. I already had a sonnet that was working. I was like, this is it. And it just sort of like came together like magically. And then I knew it was done, which I don't think is always the case. Like, like sometimes you feel like it's never done, but this one felt, and then it was really, that was a blessing with the structure being so highly structured, because then I was like, the ones that didn't fit in, I didn't mourn them anymore. I didn't question them anymore. It was like, no, this is what the book demanded. I figured it out. And that was it. But that's kind of a strange experience. Like that's not always going to happen.
I like that you said this is what the book demanded, because that's really something that a lot of younger poets and older poets do overlook. The fact that the poems are talking to you, they're telling you stuff. You actually have to listen to your own work. And that's true with the book. You have to listen to what the book is wanting over anything precious to you, I think.
Thank you. Come out this door. We're trying to speak out.
That went well. Thank you. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always curious if anyone wants to share what's feeding you creatively or bringing you joy right now, and bonus points if it's other than poetry.
We need all the joy we can get right now. Joy.
Yes. Well, Martha,
You go.
I just went. Joy. Well, it's poetry related. I just came from the Youngstown Lit Festival, and like just this morning, I got up at 7 and drove here. I haven't been home yet. My suitcase is in the car. But it's so, I think you know this because you're all here on a beautiful Sunday afternoon for poetry. Like when you give yourself the luxury of 3 days with other writers, there's nothing better. I feel so nourished just having had listening to other writers, having conversation, the deep conversations that you have after the panels, and then you go out to dinner and you're just talking through the night. I'm so full and happy, but that came from poetry. My cat also makes me happy.
Yeah, I have 2 cats and they also make me very happy. And they're endlessly fascinating, so much smarter than we are. I think I've been reading Justin Torres's new novel Blackouts, which I think is amazing. And a friend of mine who just finished a novel, I've been reading a draft of her novel, Amanda Nadelberg, who's also a poet, and that's been feeding me as well. So fiction lately has been doing Claire Keegan. I really love her work. And lots of music, listening to lots of music.
Okay, I have 4 cats. They give me a tremendous amount. And I, but I'm thinking like, joy is a really bright, loud word. But I think that there's also maybe a quieter joy or something that can come from just attentiveness and slowing down and not really, I mean, it's great to have those opportunities to go to an artist residency or to go to some like literary festivals and whatnot, but also just we don't do that every day. But I find that for my own self, just to keep myself going for sustenance, it's more about, even if I have to leave in 20 minutes, is just kind of like slowing it down. And there's like the red tulips with the black dots, things like that. Just those tiny things, which are what poetry is so much about and from. But also it's like a quality of space, kind of cultivating a quality of space around us that can give us maybe not the bright, loud joy, but just sort of like an okayness, and a more of a luminousness or something. So.
That was beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for that wonderful reading. And please buy books. If you have other questions, please ask the poets while you're getting them to sign. And don't forget to come back November 10th.